Welcome to Self-Helpful. I'm your guide, Kevin Miller, and I curate the sea of new personal development messages to bring the most influential leaders onto this show. Join me as I question my guests to better understand their counsel so we can all integrate the wisdom into our lives, because we all want to elevate our own experience and improve the way we show up for others. The Self-Helpful Podcast is presented by Ziglar, your premier source for equipping coaches. Visit Ziglar.com. Hello, Self-Helpful listeners, and welcome to the Peak Wellness episode, where we seek to strengthen our bodies, our foundations, and build our lives on top of them. In this episode, why fit kids are literally smarter. Our guest today is Dr. Daniel O'Neill. He's an orthopedic surgeon, sports medicine doctor, and sports psychologist. And Dr. O'Neill's leading the charge to help our kids. And his book is called Survival of the Fit: How Physical Education Ensures Academic Achievement and a Healthy Life. Our kids are more and more sedentary. I think we all know that. They're getting fatter and out of shape and sicker, and the consequences are pretty dire as their brains grow and function out of the health of their bodies. Schools are doing away with physical education and activity, and us parents aren't always fostering play and activity and are letting the kids sit still on screens all day. My co-host is Randy James, medical doctor and functional medicine expert, and my dear friend, and we struggle with this just as every other parent does. We want smart kids. We want resilient kids, kids who don't fall into depression. So what do we do about it? That's what this show is about. You can find Dr. Daniel O'Neill at survivalofthefit.net, survivalofthefit.net, and find his book anywhere. And hey, quick note, you can watch this full episode on YouTube if you want. Just search for Self-Helpful with Kevin Miller. Dan, as soon as I was contacted by your people, on this topic, I mean, it's one that not only do Randy and I talk about it on the show, talk about this issue of kids and wellness and what's happening in the culture, but we're living it. We've got kids ourselves, and we've got, especially kind of our muse right now is middle school boys. Wow. He's 14, right?
Well, so my oldest, just started high school. So yeah, we've been in, and I have one in middle school. We are in the middle of basketball season. Yeah. We're in it.
Yeah. Well, and I've got 15 and 16-year-old boys as well, and dealing with this active lifestyle, athlete or not athlete, which I know you talk about. And ultimately, everybody's sitting there going, okay, if I hear this message, how do I inspire my kids? So I'm eager to get into that, but I appreciate what you've done just to really say, look, this is what's happening. I mean, right now in this culture, I'll put this to you. This is a question that I got given to me last night. I thought, that's a great question for guests. Is right now, as you're looking at this, what most worries you?
What most worries me is that we are very clearly losing the war against, the two-dimensional entertainment and the ultra-processed foods. And these kids are not happy. And I think that's the saddest part, is that if these kids were happy, if they were like, you had nothing when you were growing up. We have these great, eye boxes and computers and all this stuff, and we're just having the ball, but they're not having a ball. They're anxious. They're depressed. It's so sad to me because they're so disconnected from Mother Nature and from the world.
Well, and what is the terminology that we talk about? Is it deaths of despair?
The diseases of despair.
Right.
Diseases. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And
go ahead.
I'm sorry, when I make the statement that this generation will have a shorter lifespan than the last, part of that is the diabetes and the high blood pressure that the kids have now, but also a big part of that, as you know, is the diseases of despair. And our world we're not happy because we've forgotten about our primitive brain. And whether we like it or not, we are not different than 200,000 years ago. And on a talk I gave the other night, I have a picture of that Geico caveman, on the talk. But we really still are the Geico caveman, but we're not recognizing that. And when we have road rage, or when we try to leave the lights on all night and not sleep and mess with our circadian rhythms, we're basically saying that no, we don't need you anymore, primitive brain. But that's where all the depression, and that's where all the obesity, and that's where so much of the stuff stems from, in my opinion.
I just have to comment on the road rage in my house. I think our kids, it's not road rage, but holy cow, is their Xbox rage.
Yeah.
Right.
There you go.
Yeah. You talked about play. And again, this is a topic we come into so much. We just haven't done the focus on it that you have. But as kids, looking back to my childhood and the lifestyle that we had, there were 3 stations and PBS, not much going on. And after school, school was PE, it was recess. And for my recess, man, we were just running like mad. And then afterwards, what is there to do? I would read. I was a big reader, but ultimately I'd end up out on my bike, and we're building ramps, and we're, exploring things. And now, of course, as you talk about, kids to play do not have to get up off of their butt for a quicker, more exciting dopamine hit, I guess. They don't have to. And so we're stuck as parents, and that's what's on my heart so much, as how do we manufacture this? We've got to get them off and say, no, put down that thing that's so fun and go out and inspire. And even with my kids who get it, my kids truly get it. They understand health and wellness. I don't have to, they understand, but it's still the lure. It's right there. Yeah.
So, and I know that the two of you have spoken about this, but the big thing for me is this concept of physical identity. And that's a phrase that I came up with. But we are born with a physical identity. And that's why you don't need 2-year-olds. You don't need to tell 2-year-olds to play. You don't need to tell them to dig into the dirt and pull out the worms and put them in their mouths. You don't need to tell them. 2-year-olds are not going to go in front of a screen if they have a choice of Mother Nature. Mother Nature will win every time. But then what happens is, as they get older, particularly as they start getting school age, you've got to be able to sit down for a certain amount of time and this and that. And then we start training them. We start training them to get in front of televisions. One of the things I remember from 20 or 25 years ago, this family that used to babysit my dog, I'd go over there, and the mother said, watch what's going on here. And it was a show called Blue's Clues. I don't know if that's still around.
Yeah, my kids saw it. Yeah.
Right. And I guess that Lori, who has a degree in education, thought this was so amazing how it affected her, her child at the time, her young child at the time. And so the kids are getting addicted to this stuff. Sesame Street wasn't around when I was a kid, but Sesame Street was one thing, and that was very educational. But the Blue's Clues thing, I don't know how much education there is in it. I didn't watch more than a few minutes. But the bottom line is that they learned how to addict our children. I use that word very purposefully. They addict our children, and Facebook obviously is an addiction, and Call of Duty is an addiction, and all these things, and they're incredibly good at it. And again, I talk about it a lot, but in my heart of hearts, I don't really understand it because I haven't been addicted to it, And most of our generation, sorry to pull you guys up with me, but if you're 50 or 40 or better, you haven't been affected by this stuff, but these kids are, and it's horrifying.
Hey, Dan, just for our information, how old are you?
I'm 64.
64, okay. 50, and 52. So we're closer to you than we are to our kids.
Absolutely.
Right.
Yeah. You talk about, I appreciated you talking about physical identity, because I've talked about, again, going to my 2 middle school boys, that one, he likes the athletic aspect of that. He kind of wants that piece of his identity to be attached to that. My other one doesn't at all. He could care less. He would rather just read. Again, he understands the benefit of movement and exercise and whatnot. But we've talked about that, about you talk about it in the book. You've got the nerds and the jocks, right? And you automatically attach to one of those. As kids, we were both on the jock side for the most part, doing sports.
More jockey than nerdy.
Yeah, me too. Yeah. But I mean, we talked about it even with adults these days. I mean, how many people associate with being an athlete? I mean, very few, less and less, every day. And so again, the physical identity, I like that term. We're going to continue talking about that long after this interview. What a great piece to put towards people is, what is your physical identity? Because I assume that it's just a bigger and bigger void these days. Is that what you're saying? That there's not one really?
You have one. It's in your genes. It's in that primitive brain, but we pound it out of you. And we don't pound. And the bottom line is that, as you pointed out, your listeners are the 20%, if we want to use the 80-20 rule.
Yeah.
And so are you guys, and so am I. We are the 20%. We have never lost our physical identity, and your kids have not lost their physical identity. However, a big chunk of our population has, and that's why when I was listening to your earlier conversation talking about athletic identity and Britt Brewer, I talk about this in my book, kind of made that term popular. And what's the other big problem that we're getting into, besides the kids losing their physical identity, is at the age of 7, they start identifying as athlete and non-athlete. So by the age of 7, if your child has lost their physical identity, if they're identifying as a non-athlete, they're screwed in the 21st century. They've got big problems because they're going down the road of video games and bad food, and it's the saddest thing in the world to me.
And that's what I wanted to ask you about, is to kind of outline. I mean, right at the beginning of your book and your information, you talk about, we've got American children 30% overweight, 20% in the obese category, 25% diabetes or pre-diabetes, and then the increase in depression, stress, anxiety at record levels. What is the Because I think as a culture and as parents, we just, they point off, kids are addicted to the screens, that's all they want to do. And we just kind of push it off, and we figure, but they're also smart. They're learning these things. They can do great on the computers. They're going to go off and get jobs or whatever. But what is the cost that you would say, guys, you're not getting it. You're not understanding what the true cost is now and is projected to be out here as a result of this.
Yeah, the true cost is billions and billions of dollars in healthcare, and billions of dollars in mental health care, because these kids are suffering. And the other point I make is, when I was a kid and we would steal cigarettes from our parents because they all smoked, we were going to get sick from cigarettes in our 50s and 60s and 70s. These kids are sick now, and we're not doing anything about it. And the other really depressing thing that I talk about in the book is, I think that this generation is lost. And I think that my wife's a 7th grade teacher. I think our middle schoolers and high schoolers, I think that they're gone, and we can't. They are addicted. And when you are an obese person, and you guys know this very well, and you try to lose weight, you try to lose 100 pounds, 200 pounds. I'm seeing a guy next week, 448 pounds. Just, you're right, exactly. Well, it's an astronomical amount of weight. It might be the biggest guy I've ever seen. For those people to lose weight, it is an avocation for them. Just like with your bike racing and such, it becomes an avocation. It is something that they have to put an enormous amount of energy and time into to keep that weight down, and watch their diet like hawks. And what's my exercise today? It's a really hard thing to do. And to ask your middle schooler to stop being addicted. And this kid's picture was on the front page of the Sunday Times a couple of weeks ago. But to try to get them off that is a huge task. It's not like losing 300 pounds, but it's a huge task. My feeling is we've got to go into our school systems now and get the kindergartners and then make sure they get physical education every day. They don't lose their physical identity. And then next year when they're first graders, now we've got kindergarten and first grade. And then next year we've got second and first in kindergarten, and slowly build that up. So literally in 20 years, we're going to have a population of people that are much healthier and have not lost their physical identity. And hopefully we can flip that 80-20 scale around.
Is your focus, a couple of weeks ago, I had Robert Koch on the show, one of our top 20 wealthiest people on the planet. And he's talking about really looking at institutions for change, the power of institutions, which, man, I get it. We talk so often about the blue zones, Dan Buettner's blue zones. And one of the best things for your health is to be in an environment of health. So here you are talking about the institutions of education primarily. And I know you're focused to make PE, year around. So I understand that. And my balance, or not my balance, I guess, but the question then is, obviously over here on the parental side, I mean, there's your two areas. I mean, can we, how much of a change can we make on the institutional side, or can we make with the kids from the institutional side if it's not being advocated over here from the parents?
Can I put a corollary
Please.
on there, Dan? So I did notice in your book, and I'm not sure how to say his name, Dr. Rady, the Harvard psychiatrist.
Yeah, John Rady, yeah.
Rady.
Yeah.
And so that book was very influential to me in 13, 14, 15, somewhere back there, connecting. So in my own home and family, there was an impact. But back then, he was saying, okay, let's look at this school system. And in my mind, I'm like, okay, well, it's proven. And then the La Sierra High School, and it's proven. So now we're back to the institutional and parental question. The data is there. There's no doubt. So why are we still pulling back on PE within the system when the data, which is what the system is built to run off of, I'm confused. And in my home, I can institute a rule. But then they go to school, and again, we're in the middle of it. And part of my COVID awareness for my teenagers is, as a parent, I was also not relying on, but I enjoyed the fact that the school had parameters, and forever it was
structure. That it was
structure. Yeah. That's the better word. Yeah, fall sport, winter sport, spring sport. There was never not a sport. And then for 18 months, my kid had school and then nothing. And unless I came in and gave him a chore or said, go outside, and then I'm the enforcer and the problem in his mind. So, I got off onto COVID there. I'm going to put the question back to you. So the data is there. You're at a national level now talking to people. What's the resistance?
Well,
it just seems so easy. Why?
I love that. I love the fact that you said that, because, with Rady's book was you would think a game changer to a large extent, because, and the other study that I point to in the book was 2013. So this data was all coming out. So so then my theory was, all politics is local, right? So unless you do it in your home district, people aren't going to believe it. People aren't going to believe the data from Naperville, Illinois, right? So we started a little program at one of the elementary schools here. And I was talking on the phone with Charlie Bash, who's a big public health guy down in Columbia. And I said to Charlie, I said, yeah, Charlie, I said, we're, running a little study at our, he was going to reach through the phone and throttle me, because exactly what you just said. He says, we don't need any more data. Stop with the studies. It's over. We got the data. There's no question what's going on. So thank you for saying that. There is no question. Nobody can argue with this. It's climate change. We have the data. Now, what are we going to do about it? What we're going to do about it is work through the school system, because, like it or not, parents, you have abdicated your duties in this case. And I don't blame you entirely for that. You were fighting against something that you had no business fighting. You got in the ring with Ali in his prime. You had no chance in this fight. And we had Christmas dinner here a number of years ago. And it turns out my nephew came with an attitude, and I wasn't ready for it. So when I told him to take his hat off before dinner, there was a fight. And I didn't see it coming. And all of a sudden, I'm like, what? We're fighting about a hat. And parents did not see this coming, because they didn't live it. They had no idea about how addictive Call of Duty is. They had they had some idea about how addictive McDonald's is, but they're only getting more addictive. And so they didn't see it coming. So the bottom line is that the parents have abdicated their duty here, and somebody's got to take it up. And that's where the school comes in. So for at least 180 days, we can get that child's heart rate up, we can get that child moving, and hopefully we can hold on to that child's physical identity. And then on the weekends and in summer times, the child will say, we used to have a lot of fun running around playing in gym class. Maybe we should do that here.
It's interesting too, as I think about it, as we look at the institution of education. And, we're in my family with my kids, we've done everything. We've done homeschool, we've done private school, we've done part-time school. We just flip around according to the season, what's going on, what we want to try. But yeah, you're right. If we have our kids in school, and I'm thinking, because right now we both do, I've got 3 of mine at least in, right now they're going 5 days a week now. And so I took them in, we leave the house at 7:15, drive down and drop them off a little after 7:30, pick them up at 3. Now, thank goodness, most of my kids are involved. They're going to go to dance, gymnastics, or running or whatever. But even from a time standpoint, if I'm going to put my kids in public school, there's so little time, especially if you've got some things happening after school, before dinner happens and whatnot, to even have them do a physical activity if it's not happening at school. So it does draw me to where your focus is, of focusing on the institution. But then if the place is a place for academia, for learning, we all know that, start off in the morning with your exercise and you increase your BDNF. Why wouldn't the school do that? Even the high school, to say, okay, homeroom class, we're going to do 15 minutes of calisthenics just to get the brain running well. But with the little ones, how often does this happen? This happens at my house. Every once in a while, it'll be a Saturday. The kids are there. We've had a lazy morning and they're just kind of jumping off the walls. And it occurs to me, oh my gosh, go outside, get on the trampoline, because you guys are exerting this energy. What would the behavior change, even of the kids, to start off the morning, especially for the lower age kids, start off the morning with that exercise? It makes me think, as a parent, am I better off to get them up even earlier? And for 15 minutes, we're going to do a HIIT workout so that they're smarter and better behaved at school.
That would be something they'd be talking about as adults. My father. But you're absolutely right. And we know academics and the big mantra I put in the book, there is no STEM without fitness. And the reason that after No Child Left Behind in 2002 was instituted, and they took 50% of the time away from PE and they put it into English and math. The reason English and math scores did not improve is the kids are not fit enough to learn. They're not fit enough to learn math. That's why we're still down with Croatia and 37th in the world in math knowledge. The kids are not fit enough. They don't have that. Their bellies are full of horrible food and Pop-Tarts and whatever they've had for breakfast. And that was one of the things we did at our local school. We had the gym teacher or somebody coming in early and getting their heart rates up. And so that way, like you say, boom, they're ready to go. They're ready to learn.
Yeah, their capacity. I mean, that's a word
I was just going to go to the brain's resilience, the brain's capacity to actually learn. And, facetiously, I tell my son, too, who I think has retained his physical fitness identity. And we're seeking the balance with I love the two-dimensional entertainment. And I'll say, I bet you'd be a better gamer after you go exercise. And I think you really would, if you truly valued what, his thing is Destiny and as opposed to Call of Duty or whatever it is that they're playing these days.
Yeah.
And so we facetiously say that.
I'm thinking about it too. I mean, I was saying it kind of facetiously, but as I say it, why not? Why? 10 minutes.
10 minutes of a hit, burpee, whatever that they're going to do. By definition, like you say, we have the data. And you've contributed to more data. We have another national level smart guy saying we have the data, and but I have abdicated I'm also thinking of my kid, 20 years from now, going to a counselor saying my dad made me do burpees in the morning, and what's the consequence?
That's right. But it would be great just thinking about it, and the other, I mean, there's so many, examples, but what's the one thing to stave off Alzheimer's? And you guys, again, are a bit behind me on this one, but this is something that I think about, probably too often. And the one thing we know is not Sudokus and it's not crossword puzzles and it's not learning the piano, although that's a good one, but it's the exercise, and so why, if it works for 70-year-olds, it would make sense that it work for 7-year-olds, I mean, we don't have to keep reinventing the wheel here. We have so much data. And you look at your puppy dogs, their lives are so much better if they've had a good run, right? I mean, this is not magic, which is why I make a big deal about the octopus. Yeah.
So Dan, I'm just redoing another to-do box saying, okay, what you said about smoking, like we all grew up with, oh my gosh, if you smoke, when you're 50, you're going to get cancer. But right now, we have the evidence that if I don't, as a father, institute a structure of when you can play, when you cannot play, what these lines are, then I'm sending my kid down a pathway of increasing likelihood of illness at 18, of right now. And why would I expect my 10, 13, or 15-year-old to be able to institute their own structure when, like you said, Blue's Clues was designed to get your eyes on the screen? Mm-hmm. There's smart people behind this, and we talked about Social Dilemma and Childhood 2.0 and all of these. The data is there. There's no doubt about it. The addictiveness is there. So I am morally obligated, much to my daunted, intrepid, I'm worried about the conversation over dinner tonight, is to say, I have to pull the plug. I have to. Yeah. And the consequences of my kids wrestling through that, and maybe they have to go to a counselor later on, but that's about a 1% chance versus a much higher percent chance that if I don't do that, some other odd consequence is going to be there. Well, thank you, Dan, for ruining my dinner tonight. I'm just going to blame you and say.
And by the way, you also, you guys have been proponents for the whole food thing. So at least I'm expecting your dinner to be somewhat healthy for these kids. But but the other thing is, right, you've got to give them a healthy dinner. The other thing that you touched on was, and I hesitated, but I still did, getting myself in trouble mentioning this concept of cooperation and that these kids need to play to learn how to do things and flexibility and cooperation. And the people in Washington are probably older. They wouldn't fall into that category. But there's, maybe if they got more exercise, there'd be more cooperation and they'd pick sides for ball games. And but it really is. There's so much that play gives the kids that it's just like you say. Yeah, it's they've got to experience it.
Well, it's drawn me. Well, actually, it's been Randy's example. So I was a pro athlete, and I really got kind of burnt out with my experience there. The kind of the self focus and narcissism of the elite sport that I was in, and so I had my first set of kids at least, and I just didn't advocate sports. Organized sports. I didn't. Now we did a lot of we had an active family, active lifestyle. But it was seeing his kids that really brought me back into advocating my kids to get into organized sports because of, you said, cooperation and just, man, the overcoming that they experience in that. It's made me more of an advocate as a parent to have your kid, in a sport. And back to what you're talking about now, if we can't rely on the school structure to be doing PE, to be having them active at recess or even doing recess or whatnot, then the next step is what can we do structured on the other side, whether it's a sport. So like to take my one kid he's just not competitive. He doesn't care or whatever. Well, I've got a kid in gymnastics right now and she's not thinking of being competitive. It's just improving. So maybe this kid, I should get into karate as a discipline, not as an athletic thing, not as a sport, not as a competition, but it's something where he's going to go, I'm going to drop him off. He's going to have structure and it's going to be a discipline because it is, when you talk about correlation, and I do talk to my kids about this, I see the bookshelf behind, here's mine of all the people, now including you, that I've had on shows. I've got, over 150 of these world leaders and influencers, and I've yet to find one when I talk to them about their healthy habits, and we hit on the physical side, and they go, nah, 100%,
that's a waste of time.
100% sedentary. I haven't found one. I've got some that have said, man, I really struggle with it. And most of them, I've had a couple who've said, I still hate it, but I have a personal trainer because I know what it does for my brain. And my kids get that. But we as a culture, again, we've lost it. It's like the lost art of physical movement. Yeah.
And I know you guys have talked about this, but our brains are built for our bodies, right? It's not the other way around. Our brains are built so we can use these incredible hands and then these big buttock muscles to run over the savannah and this and that. And so we have to move our bodies and engage our bodies in order to get those neurons firing and getting back to our brain. And and if we don't do that, things are just not going to work well. And so you have to have the movement. Again, it gets back to that primitive brain concept. We absolutely have to have that. And we dumb it down to 10,000 steps, but really we were doing twice that, as hunter-gatherers. And that's how we have evolved, and that's where we are now. And we have to use our bodies to keep the brain going, for sure.
So as we so often say, not unfortunately, but actually fortunately, it boils down to, and for me on the medical side of things, a theme that I would say in functional medicine, and especially the way we do it, is your life, meaning what you do, what you eat, how you move. Your life is your main medicine. Exercise, movement is a prime, not basic, not simple, not old, not whatever. No. Prime medicine for your brain, for your heart, for your liver, for your kidney. And if you don't do it, then your lack of exercise is your main poison. It is your main toxin, your main deficiency, just like sleep, just like fasting, moments of not eating, just like relationships, cooperation with other people. If you're in a toxic relationship, it is your prime toxin. And Nowadays we have this $5+ trillion medical system that people want to rely on to give them then their happiness, their fulfillment and sense of purpose and meaning. And Kevin and I joke all the time where I invite people into a practice and invite them to eat nothing and go outside and move around. It's like, that's your best medicine. And only now is part of that $5 trillion system figuring out the actual elegant, mysterious science behind it all. And that's your blending of the social and the hard sciences, is to say, yeah, the hard sciences are way behind in proving this, but we're getting there. And like you said, the data is there. We don't need to wonder if exercise is a requirement.
Well, I want to ask you to unpack that, though. You just talking about the hard and the soft, because you guys are talking medicalese stuff. So for the layman's terms, unpack that real quick, Dan.
Well, I like the fact that you don't pull punches. And one of the promises I made in the book was not to pull any punches. Using words like addiction and using words like toxin, I think is not hyperbolic. I think that's really, key, that this stuff is not optional. This is really bad for you. This is bad for your health. And I almost feel like as a society, maybe we want to make everything okay, and we want to, your choices are fine and this and that. And we've been talking, I've gotten involved with this other fellow who's big on the nutrition side of things. And we talked to this one group who run these private schools, and they were talking about, they use the word choice. And I said, I don't know if we can give choice to teenagers because they're polluted, they're addicted, and there are just some things that where it is more black and white than we want to say. And I think that we as a society want to be gray all the time, and everybody's opinion is okay, and this is all okay, and it's not, because we are, again, these piles of protoplasm. So with the sports psych component, I call myself a physical sports psychologist. It has to start with the body. And I had somebody ask me on a podcast, it was more of a sports psych thing. And, well, what's your one, thing that you would say for the sports psych aspect of competitions and stuff? I said, they should get stronger. They should get fitter, because the fitter you are going into that competition, that's your psych. That's where you're going to feel better about it. And so, yeah, I love the stuff that you guys talk about, because you don't try to parse it.
I was going to say, when you're saying that we just talked about it the other day, where you're saying as you get older, there's more gray. And then we bounce around on that. And so back to the teenagers, I have a 15-year-old, and I said, let me just tell you, this is black and white. If you don't do the work ahead of time to get your driver's license on time, which used to be when we were kids, on day one of being 16, I was ready to go.
Oh my gosh, yeah.
And these kids these days, he's not getting ready. I'm saying, this is going to be black and white. In this town, we live in a small town, you will walk. Yeah. As long as because now we're a month after your time, you're going to be walking for a month. And if you want to drive the car prior to 16, it's black and white. No, right? Like we tell our teenagers, you can't drive. They might identify as 16 years old in a day, but it doesn't matter. You can't drive. There's a black and whiteness here. And that's where I think I agree. We're so worried about offending, and we have such a problem with overweightness that we talked before about in the Target stores. I was shopping, and the pictures on the wall, granted, I don't think we need to have anorexic, irrationally looking people, like everybody has to be this beautiful or whatever that is. But then we make it okay to be morbidly obese. And it's not. We're not being fair to these kids who can't make the decision, or to even people.
Yeah.
Absolutely. The word obesity, and it's heartbreaking, and it doesn't make you a bad person. It's something that we have done to you as a society. So many of these younger people, we've allowed you to be obese. That is not your natural state. Go back just, two or three generations. In my class, I remember we had a kid who was obese, and this poor boy, now looking back on it, I feel so bad. He was the fat kid in the school, and it's heartbreaking now. But now he wouldn't be just a fat kid. There'd be dozens of him, and it's health and it's happiness, and it's not that I care what you look like. That has nothing to do with it. I care what your heart is doing to push the blood through that, and I care what your brain is doing with the chemicals that you've got that are making you unhappy. It's just not. And we are the adults in the room. We have to make sure the kids are healthy. The sixth grade, we should be graduating from high school with a sixth grade reading level of fitness. That means you should be able to do some push-ups. You should be able to hold a plank for at least 2 minutes. You should be able to do some sit-ups and maybe one pull-up. Because I can't do much.
Yeah, can we have a requirement for the valedictorian that along with the 4.0, you also must be able to do, these things.
Exactly.
I mean, you guys both talked a second ago somewhat on what got me thinking about is just the self-regulation, the self-governing that we expect the kids to do. And yet we as adults don't have a good record of doing that, especially with health and wellness. And you talked about healthy food. So, I don't have a bowl of I don't buy M&Ms and put them out because I'll eat them. And so would my kids. Why would they not? So the only way that I keep them from eating the junk is I don't buy it and I don't put it in the pantry. That's how I've done it. So we're back to you, black and white, clear boundary. And yet the M&Ms of the screen are all around. And it's really hard not to. Yeah. It's talking about COVID. So my kids all have iPads or whatever the Mac, what do the high school kids have? They've got some
the
Chromebook or something like that.
Chromebooks,
and they're giving it to them by the school. So again, unless I'm going to take them out and homeschool them without a screen, they by proxy are given a screen. So now it feels harder for me to regulate that. So we've got to come up with other ways to do that. But man, that is a fight when it is something I can keep the M&Ms away. I can't keep the screen away. So we have to put boundaries and restrictions that people don't want to do. We don't want the conflict. We don't want that's such a social, you're a pariah if you're not, on there. That's a hard, but then again, we're looking at if we want them to be, so I'm thinking about Learning RX. You familiar with Learning RX? It's a franchise around the country where people are generally going to take their kids if there's a learning disability or they're looking for high achievement. Either way, they're kind of both sides there. Well, my wife works for them and they're looking at all the brain training, cognitive training, all these things to do. And I'm thinking as we're doing this, do they even talk about, let's talk about what you're feeding your kid, because if you're if the kid just showed up here for his lesson on, as you said, Pop-Tarts and whatever, and hasn't moved for 24 hours, we're already at deficit. We're blind. We're running blind, which is, again, that's your point there. And how do we though instill that in the structure of schools, which that's what you're lobbying for right now?
Yeah, absolutely. When I was a kid, this all started with my generation and Swanson TV dinners and McDonald's. And I remember they opened a McDonald's, 10 miles from where I grew up. And I remember going there and it was a big deal, to go to a McDonald's. And it was crack. It was the greatest, McDonald's milkshakes and hamburgers and French fries. And it really is. And then it started. But now here we are, 60 years, 50 years later. The schools have the power, if we give it to them, to make these changes. But the principals and the superintendents and stuff are fighting the time concept. And, the school has to have time for the DARE program. The school has to have time. And I don't want to get in fights with art teachers and music teachers because I know how important that is. But in point of fact, Yo-Yo Ma, like you point out, has some level of fitness. Otherwise, he couldn't do what he does, musically. And so we've got to start when the principals and the teachers sit down to make a curriculum. They've got to start with, okay, where the kid's going to run around in the morning. We'll get the kids here early, run around for 15 minutes. Okay, now they go to classes. Okay, now it's 11 o'clock. Now they go to, gym class, or it's 10:30, they go to gym class. Then they have another class, and then they go to lunch and they have recess. They have to really put that. California in 1866 legislated 2 exercise periods a day for school children. 1866. How many of these kids, were watching TV in 1866, and eating French fries? Yet they knew the importance of revving these kids' hearts up twice a day to get them to learn anything. That was California. They're always ahead of the game,
Have any studies been done, Dan, in a formal education environment where they've taken kids and without changing the curriculum have just focused on, food and exercise? Because if it did, I would have to say that they were going to come out with higher grades. It's
going to be, it's not even close. It would be easy to do. There have been some schools, as you know, that have done it. And Rady talks about this in his book. Why hasn't every school said, hold it, if they can do it, why don't we do it? And you don't need the money. I think that because one of the schools that did it was this school up in Saskatchewan, and this poor ADHD, school of last resort, and they did it. They got the kids exercising. So again, as we keep saying, the data is there. There just seems to be this inertia on the part of us as adults, and that's why I talked to the PTA the other night, and I'm talking to the school board, next week, and I'll talk to anybody. But there's just this inertia. And because I think we just don't believe it because we don't understand it. Yeah. We don't believe how addictive that video game and that Facebook and that computer time with our boyfriends and girlfriends is.
Do you get pushback from the educational institutes, some of them feeling like, hey, we are here for academia? And while we agree with you on this food and exercise stuff, that should be the parent's responsibility. Is there ever that perspective?
Not as much as you would think. They know it. Everybody knows this. And it's not just in America. Everybody knows this around in all the Western countries. Everybody sees what the kids are doing and not doing compared to, 50 years ago. And yet, when the time comes for big change, we just seem to be incapable of doing that. And my example where I live is that if you said to these people 70 years ago, turn off your lights because the Germans are out there, would they say no? The greatest generation didn't say, no way, we're not turning off the lights, screw you. Nobody can tell me I'm an American, They turned off their lights. And the Germans, and most people didn't get bombed. And I just don't understand it. And so, right, we have all this data. We know these kids are sick. We know a solution. We just can't seem to make it happen. And that, to me, and maybe I'm going too far afield now, that to me seems like the new America. And when JFK and Eisenhower saw this happening, they made changes, and it didn't stick, but they saw the problem, and there was a groundswell. But now we can't even get people to wear masks,
So where is your, I mean, granted, so this is where your effort is. You are making this effort, this initiative to educate and to motivate these educational institutions to instill this? Where is your, if I can ask, where is your primary hope in that?
Great. Thank you. This has to be a call to action. So we are introducing legislature in the New Hampshire House this autumn to get this done, and it's going to get shot down. But that's why I'm also talking to the PTAs and the school boards. And so if we can hit it from both sides, if we can do a grassroots campaign and start getting some legislation in there, that I think is our hope. I mean, Michelle Obama tried to make a big push for the food, and she got shot down. And what's going on in our schools now? Well, Sodexo is back there, but Sodexo is not evil. If you told Sodexo, we have to have good food in our schools, Sodexo would do it, because they're the customer, and they're going to do what they're told. So we have to, it's a call to action. And one of the things I have on my website, survivalofthefit.net, are downloadable letters that I've written that you just fill in your school, your teacher, or your governor, or whatever. But you can download these and personalize them and send it to all these people. And with the hope that if we just get enough people and we get this out there, because again, despite all the data, the word has not gotten out there that this is not optional. This is not gray. This is black and white, and our kids are suffering because we can't seem to make the move. And Dr. James, you'll appreciate this. I guarantee you in 10 years, they're going to look up and say, our electronic medical records are not working. We've got to get them so they all talk to each other. And that is going to cost billions and billions, right? But that's going to happen. Well, if we had just done it 10 years ago, where everybody knew what the concept of electronic medical records were, but we couldn't pull that off as a nation. And instead, whereas Singapore and these other people have been able to do it, we couldn't do it. I feel like now, if we don't do something 25 years ago, finally the bell is going to ring, and that generation is finally going to say, we've been given a mess again by the baby boomers and we've got to do something, and then the legislation is going to be flying.
So here we are in the middle of it. And another consequence with, maybe it's Sodexo or whoever else, but our local school system, because of the subsidy system, because of the unimaginable complexity behind the scenes, it's free lunches. And I think, I talked with your boys about it the other day. So I have put a lot of work and effort into trying to teach my kids, eat this, don't eat that, whatever. But then he goes to school and it's a free lunch, and it's not broccoli.
Right.
It is.
That's it.
The worst of the acceptable, RDA of vitamins and minerals and whatever, but it's a dried up pizza, hamburger.
Say, none of it, according to Michael Pollan food rules. There's no food there.
There's enough food to sustain life, but not sustain a brain that's going to be happy and learn well and to have capacity and function. And that's where I think that, like you're saying, we are years away from people finally going, oh my gosh, let's quit smoking. Let's actually start doing exercise and paying attention to the kind and quality of nutrients that are going into the schools. We have to. And so here we are in your action items. The call to action is to the parents, to the schools, to the people, and the grassroots pieces and all of that. It just, honestly, it feels insoluble. So I'm going to put it back to you and say, okay, are there blue zones within the public school area? Where can I look to for some encouragement?
Yeah. And that's an excellent analogy. And on one of a webinar that I was giving for the book, I had a woman say that. She says, our town should be a blue zone, you know? And I'm like, oh my God, talk about upping the ante. I just want to get these kids to go into PE every day. Yeah. And you want to make a blue zone.
I want to make a blue zone.
Yeah. Right. But it's that attitude. And where you find that attitude is in the blue zones, but you also find it in the private schools. So if you go 6 miles from here over to Holderness School and you go up 100 miles to Burke Mountain Academy, those are blue zones. Those kids are getting the exercise, they're getting good food, and they're getting academia, and everybody on the campus is part of it. Everybody on campus is part of establishing that blue zone, if you will. And why can't we have that in our public schools? I think it was Roger Angel, some famous writer, at the beginning of his career. He went and he was in private school and he interviewed Fiero, I can't say his name, LaGuardia, the old New York City mayor. This was whatever, back in the 20s or 30s. And he was interviewing him, and LaGuardia was bragging about the New York City public schools. And he's like, nope, we have the best schools in the country, and you know, our kids get it. And I'm thinking to myself, do the New York City mayors, and we're getting a new mayor here in Boston, can they say that? Do they have that blue zone? No, nobody has a better school than us. Nobody has you prove it. We have, you know, great facilities. We have great teachers. We have, you know, everybody is pulling in the direction of teaching our kids and getting our kids healthy. So I think you're absolutely right. The rich keep getting richer. Why should it just be the private schools who get to be in the blue zones? Why can't we get in the public schools? And LaGuardia did establish, you know, it's insanely great, and all the bright Nobel Prize winners, et cetera, that came out of, sorry, we were doing so good, came out of the New York City public schools. Why can't we have that pride again? And how silly is it to feel like that? We can do that. You know, we can do that as Americans and as Irish and as British and French and Chinese. We can do all that stuff. But we just don't seem to want to anymore.
Well, so I'll ask then, from a tangible call to action to everybody listening to these, which the majority of the folks listening to this are going to be, you know, aspiring people and mostly parents. So they've got kids or they're involved with kids, to say, what can they do on two fronts? One is, what would be a first, again, call to action or action step on the advocating towards these educational institutions that our kids are in, and then stepping aside from them and go, okay, we're going to try to do all we can to get things to happen there. But then outside of that, what would be your primary to-do list for the parents towards their kids?
Number one, physical education every day for kindergartners, and next year for first graders, and it's just in the curriculum. And you know what, teachers and principals, figure it out. Don't tell me there's not enough time, just figure it out. And not giving these kids access to the computers and the Chromebooks. And again, I know we're talking at a tough time right now, but hopefully, let's pretend it's 6 months from now. Get them away from the screens, and I want to start that small, because I know that to get, and I think you guys were talking about it on one of your other podcasts. High schoolers are not getting any PE, and so let's forget about that. It's not going to happen. So my call to action would be, in your school district, number one, start out with kindergarten and first grade and make sure they have PE. Every kid, every day, and that is built in and is going to continue up through graduation. And number two, put the food service, put their feet to the fire and get decent food in there. and at least the kid's going to get 1 or 2 good meals a day. And number 3, my aspirational wish, we are all in this together. The lunch ladies, the custodians, the coaches, we all are speaking with one voice. As you know, when you're running a clinic, if my assistant, my trainer, somebody opens their mouth, my words are going to come out, or, whoever. And when I open my mouth, my professor's words come out and such. And this is how the game works, best practices and education. And so that has to be, and these people have to be valued. The lunch ladies and the custodians, their thoughts and their work has to be valued. But if we get that going, then we're going to have, it's a game changer. Then it's a revolution, which is what I talk about.
On just the structure, I just want to put this out there that, again, we're talking about this, but we're living it. And I've got 3 kids at home, 8, 11, and 12 years old. And yeah, again, back to the M&M analogy. If it's out there, they're going to eat them. So we take we don't let the food be there. But with the screens, that it is now, my kids are used to it. So as I say this and parents are hearing it, it's going to be a bigger fight for some of them. But when I take away the screens, they don't waste much time. We may have a minute of, I'm kind of bored, but generally, and granted, I've got the benefit of having multiple. So they've got built-in friends right there, but they are immediately, this happened last week, all of a sudden they're gone. And for hours, I don't hear them. Go up and they're in one of the rooms doing a stuffed animal zoo or something like that. But they're all over the place. They're moving and crawling and jumping and bouncing and whatever, or they're outside on the trampoline, or they're playing Legos, or they're doing something away. But it takes me providing that structure, that management, because they're not going to self-regulate if I allow them to some point, especially with the younger ones. We've just got to take them away. Now, different than our teenage kids, where now it's an educating and I feel like inspiring, with that balance of how much do we enforce. I mean, that is hard. I feel like that's still going to be, even with this message, a lot of people are going to end this show and then sit back and go, oh my gosh, what do I do? Well, you said it. It's you said this is an avocation. I mean, it is a life change to do it in this culture. I guess to some degree, I want to say there are things to do, but I want to commiserate that. Man, it is a battle. It is I don't know what to relate it to from our childhood. There's nothing so
no. And I think I was going to actually go there, that this is unprecedented. We never had this level of, it is now so easy to not be active. And 100 years ago, you had to be active. Right. So it's not conspiratorial. I don't blame Facebook or Google. They are optimizing for people's attentions, and we're people, so attention gets diverted over here, and we don't have to go out into the fields all day long for our food. So now we are optimized for inactivity, and it is hard. And so we, as the parents in this case, we're morally obligated to at least engage and begin the process of defining for our kids the border, the structure. And every family's going to do that differently. And then I look over at the public side of things and I think, okay, that's a lot harder, because now it's electing your school board and all of that. But at least engage with our friends, our neighbors, and the conversation. So I'm already formulating one of your letters to our local PE. And we know her because my wife is a coach. We're coaching our kids. She's a coach of some other team, and I know she'll be on board. It's like, okay, let's make a change. And go.
Yeah. Well, go to the website. The templates are there, and you can add to that.
What
and,
can you say the website again?
Well, I'll put it in the intro.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. Excellent. But it's and that's why I say I don't want to start trouble with all the 16-year-olds out there. That's why I want to start with the 4 and 5 and 6-year-olds, because they won't lose their physical identity, and that's it. We're fighting this with a positive.
Yeah.
The positive is Mother Nature and physical identity. And guess what? That's a tremendous weapon. And that's what we're fighting with. We're not telling that drug addict to just say no. That we know that doesn't work. Yeah. But but we're fighting it. And Mother Nature, you know, is a pretty powerful ally in this. And for those of us who have the ability to use it, you know, and live in a place where we can use it, you use it. But even places like Boston and Philadelphia and stuff, there are groups and you know, I'm in touch with a fellow who's doing something down in Boston with a group of kids, making sure they get Mother Nature into their system every week. So.
Well, and to that, you know, I'm even thinking about the reality, especially of in a big populated area, which the majority of Americans are in. They are in a populated area where if they are to take their kid and take away the screen and say, find something to do, if that kid walks outside, chances are they're not going to find another kid, which is sad, which brings me again to the maybe the necessity of an investment to get your kid in some kind of a formal, again, sport or you know karate or gymnastics, whatever, something that's going to foster that. I mean, you know, in this, when you come back to what your effort is here, and you mentioned before the healthcare, well, you did the healthcare system. That's what we're looking at. I mean, again, we're right at, now we've hit 5 trillion or so. I mean, we're in something that's untenable. I mean, we're at 5 years, 10 years. I mean, this is not working out. Something's going to hit. And it feels like they would be inviting you to the White House right now and say, man, this is the only hope we've got. If we don't get these kids understanding health and investing in their health, it's a diabolical train wreck. Right. So this isn't I don't see you in some altruistic position. They need to put you in the White House. I mean, seriously, I mean, but where's it going to go? This is happening. It's back to the unprecedented thing. This is unprecedented, and it is an absolute train wreck. And as you said, though, people aren't believing it, but we're seeing the data's there. It is. It's hard not to.
It's hard not to despair.
It is. And it is. Yeah.
Because it feels insoluble. And I think that's partly why people say, it's insoluble. Let's just find what's new on Netflix. So my inspiration is I'm motivating myself.
No, I got it. I figured it out. So tomorrow's Saturday. Okay. On the weekdays, let's take next Monday morning. Let's take all the kids' computers and stuff and bring them with us to work. And when they get the call from the kids going, it's right here. Just come get it.
Just walk over here and come
just get hike down and come
That'll
get
be
it.
your first 15 minutes of exercise.
Yep, there you go.
That's one way to do it. But that is where
at the end of the day, even, watching our kids growing up, and I feel like I had more fun. I feel like my friends and I remember very well one of my patients, this kid, fun kid, and he wanted to do something. His uncle had a house somewhere, and he says, I can't get any of my lame ass friends to go and do this. And I was like, when I was a kid, man, if you had something like that, somebody said my uncle has a house wherever, I'm there. We're going. And it's so funny the kids aren't having as much fun.
Well, you're back to your diseases of despair. That I see that too, that without having an interest, there was a meme that's been going around. Man, I probably got it on one of the computers, but it's ultimately saying, we're not going to experience the next great painter because he's never going to pick up a brush or a pen and doodle. We're not going to find the next scientist because they're not going to go experiment. And I'm back to you. Yeah. When we were kids, we didn't have anything else to do. And so we went and played, or we found an interest. I was recently reading Matthew McConaughey's new book, Green Lights. That's everybody's reading. Somebody got it for me. And I read part of it. And he talks about this summer where he's had nothing else to do, and he got the idea and he got access. He actually stole a bunch of lumber, but he went and built a treehouse. I mean, and that's what I think exactly we do. And that was the joy of that. I appreciate you pulling that out, that it was just more fun because it was this is something that I keep coming back to. We had a deeper fun, a deeper, so the kids can pick up the phone and get that, like Simon Sinek has gotten so famous, get that quick dopamine hit, but it's really shallow. It's really quick, but it's really shallow. And over here, they're missing out on the deeper joy, the deeper fulfillment. And I do too. I agree. We had more fun. I think my generation, we had more fun than I'm seeing the kids have right now at the at the altar of the screens.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I'm voting you into the White House at some level if I can. But I appreciate you obviously doing the work, doing what you're doing, but I am eager to advocate for what you're doing and join that, because I didn't think about it. I was just thinking about kids and the lack of health. I wasn't thinking about, and now my mind's on that this is that I don't know what hope there is to not have in 5 years, the 5 trillion be 10 trillion. And how are we going to foot that bill unless we come back and deal with the kids? So not only is this matter for my kid, it matters for all of our livelihood, because this isn't something that's going to be, I don't think, come to fruition. The $1 trillion, it's going to happen in our lifetime still. I mean, something's going to hit, something's going to change and affect us all, maybe to the degree that COVID has at this point.
Yeah. Well, there is a sense of convergence with a worldwide communication system, a worldwide pandemic, a worldwide, everything's coming together, and the speed at which the cost and the money is happening. You're right. I think there's going to be a, big kind of things happening, a reckoning.
Yeah.
And so I'm motivated and convicted.
You've got 2 converts here,
Dr. O'Neill.
We'll see how many thousands we can
2
get
at a time
through the audience. Hey, again, thank you for what you do. Thank you for giving us your time and educating us here.
Yeah, it's great. It was my pleasure, and I was really excited for this conversation, listening to some of your other conversations, and so it's like I knew it would be a fun hour for sure.
It was good. Thank you so much.
All right, guys.
Friends, that again was Dr. Daniel O'Neill, and his book is Survival of the Fit: How Physical Education Ensures Academic Achievement and a Healthy Life. And again, you can find him at survivalofthefit.net. Friends, thank you for tuning into Self-Helpful, where I curate the sea of new personal development materials and help you integrate wisdom into your life, because we all want to elevate our own experience and improve the way we show up for others.